welcome to episode 63 from the Shed End podcast with myself, T-Dot. Theo, how you doing?
Not bad. It's been the last couple of weeks have been a bit up and down with work and some personal stuff, but I'm happy to talk Chelsea here on my lunch break. It's been a long time, I feel, so it was nice to dust off my mic and get it out and hopefully enjoy talking about Chelsea and some of our best moments and our season end of season review now. How have you been doing?
Yeah, not bad, usual. Missing football. I mean, the Nations Leagues, it was cutting it for like the first weekend of no football, but watching I think I watched Slovakia and Serbia last night, I think. So, yeah, I'm struggling. And I watched Canadian football after that. I don't know what league it was, but it was just on BT. So I just stuck it on. But
Not
apart
not
from that,
not tempted by Soccer Aid then.
no, do you know, I did put it on. I did try, but I just can't get my head around it. Yeah, it's just too much for me to try. And I did see a clip. I think I can't remember. I think his name Mark Wright. I think was taking a
Yeah,
penalty, and Chunks wanted the penalty, and I
Petr
did see
Cech
that.
in goal as well.
Yeah, I mean, he should be dealing with the transfers, to be fair. But yeah, I think it's all for a good cause, isn't it? But I just, yeah, I can't bring myself to sort of watch it. But yeah, apart from that, I'm good. I'm good.
Good,
And
good.
we're here doing another podcast, not our final one, but the final one relating to the season. But for anyone who's listening on the audio version, please make sure you go to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. It's slowly growing. So thanks to everyone who is watching the videos or liking or commenting on the videos as well. We appreciate that. But if you're on YouTube, make sure you go to Spotify as well and click the follow button. And also at the bottom of the screen, you will see the social media accounts. So again, Instagram and Twitter, make sure you follow those accounts as well. But let's get straight into it, Theo. Let's talk about Todd Bowley first of all, because we haven't really mentioned. We obviously made a massive effort not to get drawn into the guess who's of who's going to be the takeover, who's going to be the successful person to take over Chelsea after Roman Abramovich. But Todd Bowley's come in now, Clear Lake as well, part of the sort of merged ownership of Chelsea. But what's your thoughts going forward now with new ownership, 10 years minimum, I think, in terms of Todd Bowley being at the helm? What do you think?
I'm just happy it's all wrapped up now. We have to remember we've been in a situation since almost mid-March, so it felt like it was dragging on in those last couple weeks, and it's kind of glad. Well, I'm glad that it's all sorted before going into the transfer window and the summer and the new season as well, because there was all those scary reports that we were going to go bankrupt come the end of May. We couldn't afford to pay players' wages. In terms of Todd Bowley himself, like I mentioned on one of the previous episodes, I quite like his personality. The fact he was in attendance at the Chelsea Real Madrid game, Chelsea Wolves, and Chelsea Leicester games. He seemed quite animated, in full support of the team, and also he seems like he's willing to pump some money into the club as well, and not just in the men's first team squad, but also the academy, the women's team, the Cobham facilities, the redevelopment potentially of Stamford Bridge as well. So there's a lot of positives from the takeover. And also, like I said, it's just something now that was kind of a weight on our shoulders, all that kind of just scary stories of rival fans telling us, oh, Chelsea are going to go bust. Oh, Chelsea don't have a known anymore. Chelsea can't spend money this summer. All your star players are going to leave. It was all a load of bullshit, if I'm honest. It was all a load of bullshit. And you look back at how we had that gloomy episode, I think, midway through March, almost like we were both depressed. And we look back at that now, we're probably entitled to feel that way because we were saying farewell to Abramovich. We didn't really know what the future was looking like. It was very uncertain. But now that's all cleared up. I'm glad we can kind of work towards something new now, build around what we've got. We've said our farewells to the players like Christensen and Rudiger. So we've got to now focus on rebuilding and filling those positions, centre-backs primarily, maybe a new centre midfield. We've missed out on Tchouameni now. But as another big player, I think, and another Premier League club we can go all out for this summer or next summer. So, like I said, I'm just pleased it's over. I'm pleased it's sorted, and I'm pleased that we're going into the first week of July soon with a new owner and a lot of money in the bank to spend on players.
Yeah, because I think that was some of the key things that came out of it in terms of, the amount of money that's potentially going to be available post sales as well. So I think there's a figure around 200 million, which I think it's a, we look at some of the players that potentially might come in on a free transfer. Obviously we missed out on Perisic, who I think would have been a brilliant sign. And I think obviously the Conte sort of Inter Milan link up, you expect someone like Conte to want him, and I think that's a really good signing for Spurs. But I just think that would have been a good signing for us. I think the fact that we've obviously today, Billy Gilmore's contract's been extended as well, which I think is some really good news. It kind of almost gives you the intention that he might be on the radar to stay at the club next season as well. But I wanted to talk around a key signing. You mentioned a couple of areas, but what would you say is potentially one of the key areas that Tchouameni was, for me, would have been perfect. We had the opportunity to sign him last season as well, which is painful because we ended up with Sal Niguez, which in hindsight was probably the wrong signing. But what do you think about the key area that we need to potentially look at? If we had to choose one area that ideally we need to look at, and who would that signing be?
Centre back. It's got to be centre back. You look at many of the games we played this season, we played with three at the back, and that was Christensen, Rudiger, and Thiago Silva. Thiago Silva is now 37, turning 38 in September. And the other two players that I just listed have gone. They've left there. They're going to sign for Real Madrid and Barcelona. So, and if we kind of stay as it is now, that means that we'd be pairing either Malang Sarr or Trevor Chalobah or Azpilicueta alongside Thiago Silva. Of course, there's a potential couple loanees that could come back, like Ethan Ampadu, like Levi Colville, but I'm not sure they'll be ready yet to play every minute of every game in the Premier League. So I think it's got to be centre-back. Jules Koundé's name's been listed a lot. He's been mentioned a lot. I have some reservations around him. So I think my main target would be Koulibaly, Napoli's centre-back. He's 30 years old, which I think is the perfect age for a centre-back. We'll be getting a good maybe 4 or 5 years of his service, if he performs well. He's experienced in Serie A. He's always been at that top level in Serie A. Actually, a funny story, when I was, I think, in the south of France, more than a couple of summers ago, when it was the summer when Antonio Conte took over for the first time at Chelsea, Koulibaly's agent, who I think he shares the same agent as Vincent Kompany as well, was staying in the same hotel as me. And every day I was opening Twitter, seeing we were linked to Koulibaly. Conte wanted Koulibaly at Chelsea. And I was looking at the agent sat next to me on the sun lounger. And I was looking at him, and he kept getting his phone out, going for calls, going for this. So I was so tempted to ask him, is it going to happen? Is he signing for Chelsea? And I just kept my mouth shut in the end. But I think this summer's the perfect one to go all out for him. I think we can get him for a lot cheaper than we would have paid maybe in the summer of 2016, 2017, given his age, given that I think he's done all he can at Napoli now and wants a new challenge. So if I had a choice, I think I'd rather Koulibaly over Jules Koundé. I think the player's profile fits the what we're going for a lot better. And I've always had the reservations of Koundé. I think he is a bit of a hothead. I still think that. I've watched a few French national team football games, and he still has a reassured me of confidence. So it's got to be Koulibaly for me.
I mean, I agree with you 100%. I do like. I mean, there's nothing to say we can't go for both of them. I think we do need two centre backs. I'll be honest. I think the fact that we still have Malang Sarr as an option after last season, we've kind of seen that he's potentially not up to the level that we need as a centre back. You mentioned Thiago Silva, who for me still is arguably our best centre back that we've got at the club now as well. But we do need some more experience, and I think having both of them as options. I mean, centre backs is definitely going to be top of the list in terms of transfer targets. I think for Tuchel and the club itself, but I do think central mid, that sort of midfield for me. We missed out on Tchouameni. Like I said, he would have been for me the perfect signing. The sort of missing piece of the puzzle. Everyone will talk about Lukaku and needing a striker. I think if we can get that midfield right. We noticed even Kante, I think he's on international break. He's got injured again already. He's been returned from the French national team injured. So it tells you that he's overplayed. We can't really go into next season with that, constant injury sort of crisis with Kante. I think, obviously Declan Rice is the main target. I think that a lot of people have been talking about at Chelsea. And I think if we can get him at a reasonable, not extortionate price in terms of 120 million or something stupid, I think that for me has to be maybe the primary. I think centre backs is a given. I think we have to bring those in. I think we can't go into the season with Ethan Ampadu and Malang Sarr as options at centre back. We just can't. It's if we're going to be pushing for the league or going further in the Champions League or trying to win it, we're going to need some Koulibaly or even a Jules Koundé, Wesley Fofana, those sort of. I mean, even Fofana at a push. I mean, Leicester aren't going to sell him for anything less than maybe 70, 80 million, which you have to ask yourself that question. Is it worth paying that much for Wesley Fofana? personally, I don't think it is, but I think midfield is key. I think we've got to assess that. Obviously, we know Conor Gallagher's potentially another option, Billy Gilmore. But if we're talking about players that can step up and play, you know, in big games, I think Declan Rice is one of them. I think he'd flourish at the chance to play in the Champions League as well. He just, for me, it just makes sense. What's your thoughts on Rice? Do you think it's a good signing, or do you think it's one of those ones that we should try and hold out and see if we can get him on a free?
I think I'd love to see him at Chelsea. I don't know whether it's going to be this summer or next summer, because I still think Jorginho and Kante have something to offer at Chelsea. But like we saw, we were quite fortunate in our Champions League winning campaign that we always had two of the three of Kovacic, Kante and Jorginho fit. But this season, it was a mess. All three of them were injured at times, and then we had to play Loftus-Cheek alongside Sao Niguez in certain games, and that wasn't really a good kind of combination. So I think we're going to need four midfielders that can stay fit, that can play in those big games. And I don't know if that is bringing Gilmore back. I think he could still benefit from another loan, maybe to a Palace or an Everton. But would absolutely love to see Rice. But I just know that West Ham are going to be very, very hard to negotiate with. They're going to maybe stick with their maybe £120 million price tag. That's why I'm kind of, if I was someone like Tuchel, if I was someone like Mason Mount, I'd drop a WhatsApp message to Declan Rice being like, listen, you've got to force a move out now. You've got to talk to David Moyes being like, I want to hand in a transfer request. I want to go to Chelsea. I want to play European football in the Champions League. So I think he's got to play a part as well to push for that move to Chelsea and lower that price tag down, because as it is right now, 120 million is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And I don't really think I think he's world class, but I don't think he's worth 120 million quite yet. I know what's good with him is you're going to be getting a player that can play arguably the next 10 years in midfield at the club, future captain as well. He knows what it's like to play in the Premier League. He grew up around Cobham and Kingston, I think. So there's a part of me that knows he'll hit the ground running when he comes to Chelsea, but I'm still a bit like 120 million is a lot. So if we can lower that down to maybe 90 or 100, I say go for it.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think paying over the odds for him, it would be painful to do. But we've already lost out on key. I think back to Hakimi. I think back to Tchouameni. These would have been brilliant signings for Chelsea. And we also have to think as well. I'm thinking of the Harry Kane saga with Man City last season and how that ended up. And if he had any sort of, not to say he hasn't got any sense, but if he had any sense, he would try and force that move through, because if he doesn't, we could end up going for someone else in 12 months' time or whatever, and he could end up staying at West Ham. Not that that's a bad thing, but just in terms of, does he want to play in the Champions League? He's got a World Cup coming up as well. Does he want to try and, play in a new team and force his way into that World Cup squad a bit more? I mean, it's a given that he's probably going to go, but just for the experience of stepping up a bit more above West Ham, which is the next step, I think, in terms of his career. But it'll be interesting. I mean, if we pay over the odds, sometimes you've got to do that. I think, sometimes you have to take the hit on those. But I do agree with you. I think anything over sort of 100 mil, 110, at a push 120.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot. It is a lot of money. But he's proven, we know that he's not going to come into the Premier, he's not new to the Premier League. We know what he's about as well. And I just like his work rate. I think his work rate is brilliant. Even watching him for England the other day, he's just, you can just tell that he is going to be a future captain for England as well. So we'll have to see. But yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to the fun part of the episode. Best and worsts. Our favourite parts of the season. So let's just kick it off straight away. Let's start with our player of the season. I'm going to let you go first. I'd imagine we've probably got some of these, we're probably both the same, because I think we've discussed it a lot on the podcast. But I'm going to go for your player of the season first. Who are you going for?
I mean, I was at the Chelsea-Watford game when they announced the player of the season at the end of full time, and it actually turned out to be Mason Mount. I thought Mason Mount had a brilliant season. There was a period maybe after Christmas where he switched off a bit, but I think he picked up some form come maybe March, April time again. But for me, my player of the season's got to be Thiago Silva. It's got to be Thiago Silva. Like I said, he turned 37 in September. He's turning 38 of September this year. And he played 4,284 minutes of football for Chelsea. Like we mentioned in the previous episode, that's the highest amount of game time he's ever gotten since he arrived in Europe from Brazil. and he's 37. I keep
Yeah,
repeating the
yeah,
age, but he's 37. And I mean, the only other outfield player that played more minutes than him was Antonio Rudiger. So he played more football than Mason Mount, almost despite being almost double his age. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's got to be him. He scored some big goals against Tottenham home and away. Uh, I think if it wasn't for the language barrier, he'd be our captain right now.
Yeah,
He's
100%.
got that mentality. He's so cool and composed on the ball. Yeah, of course he made that mistake against West Brom last season, early on in his time at Chelsea. But since then, I think he hasn't really set a foot wrong, and he's been brilliant. And I think it's got to be him. I think Mason Mount, maybe Kovacic, maybe even Antonio Rudiger would follow quite closely. But my player of the season's got to be Thiago Silva.
Yeah. Do you know when I was writing it down this morning, I didn't actually put him on I did have him on
Okay.
my list, but not as first. But I've gone for Kovacic. I think I just think in terms of how different we played last season with him in the team when he was injured or he was out the team, we noticed that massive difference in midfield. And I think he was arguably the best midfielder at the club last season, ahead of Jorginho, ahead of Kante, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Saul Niguez. But I just think there was key moments in games. I think back to, and the Liverpool game, for instance, those kind of games, those big games where he runs the show, and we've missed that. We've missed someone who can drive with the ball forward and make a difference in midfield. And I think like I said, we struggled when we didn't have him in the team. We were sort of crying out for him to come back as soon as he was injured. You'd realise there was going to be a massive gap in that midfield. And I think I agree with Thiago Silva, Rudiger, I think would have been on there. I just couldn't choose him because he's left the club. I just wasn't going to put him as my top. But I think in terms of what Silva and Rudiger did last season, as almost as a centre back partnership with Trevor Chalobah as well, or Christensen at times, I thought they were brilliant. But I just can't overlook Kovacic for what he did this season. He was just a different player. You forget, first of all, I always forget how old he is. I always feel like he's a lot older than he is. And we've still got many years that we can get out of him. So I think if we can keep him, bring someone in, i.e. Declan Rice, that we can play with him in midfield as well, I think it would be even better next season. But for me, it would have been Mateo Kovacic as well.
Yeah, we had to play him through injury as well in the FA Cup final because we know how
exactly.
important he is to us. So even if he's got a slight niggle, you'll play him in a way. And I think I briefly watched him against France in the Nations League, and again he was superb, absolutely superb. So I think I'd have to. I mean, for me, I'll stick with Thiago Silva, but if I had to go for a second choice, it would have been Mateo Kovacic for sure.
Yeah, definitely two standouts anyway, 100%. But let's move to the one I love talking about, the flop of the season. Now, obviously, when I say flop, yeah, we're talking. I'm talking about Lukaku.
Yeah,
mine would be Lukaku. I think it's for many reasons, and if you've ever listened to this podcast, I'm sure you'll go back, or you've been on the YouTube, you'll hear what myself and Theo think about him. But not even just for the fee. Well, in fact, no. For the fee, I'm going to be honest, it is for the fee, because when you bring someone in for 100 million, regardless of where they play, if they're a midfield, you expect them to be brilliant in midfield. If they're a defender, defend. If they're a goalkeeper, you expect them to stop goals. If they're a striker, you expect them to put the ball in the back of the net. Yes, he was the top goal scorer for Chelsea, but that doesn't actually prove anything, because it's the numbers. I mean, if he scores 6 goals and he's top goal scorer, it doesn't mean that he's good. It just means he's missed about 20 other opportunities to get more goals. The attitude on and off the field hasn't helped, I think, as well. The fact he's still pushing for this move to Inter Milan now as well. Yeah, I've run out of things to talk about with him. I'm sick of. I just want him out of the club, if I'm being 100% honest. But I think in terms of the amount of games that he performed in, there's not many where you think, maybe bar the Arsenal game, that I can honestly think of, that he actually played decent. So, for the amount of money we spent on him, it's just not. We haven't recouped anything back. And I think I read today that he's top 5 top transfers in the Premier League. So twice, I think when he went to United, he was one of the record signings then, and obviously he was a record signing at Chelsea as well. Because I think the guy that Liverpool have just signed, is it Nunez?
Darwin Nunez, yeah.
Yeah, so they've just signed him, and he's now formed part of that record transfer fees as well. But what's your thoughts on Lukaku? I saw you slightly nod when I said his name, so I'm assuming you agree.
I'm in agreement. I think when we signed him, I think it was August of last year, we both expected him to be that 20 goal a season man, compete with Salah and Kane for the Golden Boot. I even wrote an article on the Champions Journal website. I look back at it now and I reread it, and I see I've got egg on my face in a way. Yeah, I'm a massive fool,
It's
but
hindsight
no,
for us.
we could have known. We couldn't have known. We
Yeah.
thought it was a match made in heaven. He said he would have only left Inter Milan for a club like Chelsea. He's back home. There was footage of him when he was a young teenager at Stamford Bridge. They replayed that footage. They replayed footage of him when he first signed for Chelsea in 2011. And now we're realizing that there was so much that went wrong, really. He wasn't Tuchel's first or second choice. That was, in fact, Harry Kane and Haaland. It was actually Tuchel's third choice. And even then, he was still a bit reluctant on the signing. He messed up with the whole interview thing, saying he wants to be back in Inter Milan. He was forced to record an apology video. Then he came back. I think he scored his first goal in the Club World Cup, and even that was a bit like he was still looking a bit lethargic on the pitch. And then until that game against Wolves at Stamford Bridge, where we ended up drawing, we didn't see much from him. We really didn't see much from him, and it was just he finished the season as our top goal scorer, but that wasn't very difficult when you look at what he had. The players that scored around him, Havertz and Mount, aren't really natural goal scorers that are going to score you 1 or 2 goals a game. So I think he's got to be Lukaku as the flop, not just for the price tag, not just for his output on the pitch, but also for just his attitude and his discipline, and and the lies that he fed us. It's just the lies that he fed us. And I think as a Chelsea fan, we defended him. I defended him until this moment right now. But now I'm just getting pissed off, really. I'm hearing of how he still wants to go to Inter Milan despite recording that apology, despite scoring against Wolves and pointing to the badge and the fans almost like he was apologising this. He's just fed us lies, and I think he's one of those guys that's got a big ego and almost wanted to please everyone. And watch him go back to Inter and then say he wants to be back at Chelsea. He's a kid. He's a kid. So, yeah, I think if the sooner we can move him on, the better, whether it's a loan, whether it's a permanent fee away, and we can maybe bring in someone like Gabriel Jesus, which I'm all for in a way, or someone like Lewandowski, who I'm a massive fan of, or get him on a free as well. Someone who looks after himself, someone who's disciplined. So, yeah, flop of the season's got to be Romelu for me.
No. I'm glad we agreed on that one. I was scared in case we didn't, but there was no other opportunity to add anyone else into that. But let's move on to best goal of the season. What was yours? What was your standout goal of the season? I think we've probably got the same one.
Yeah, I think the Chelsea voting system on the app did quite a good job at showcasing all the best goals we've had this season. I think the top 3 for me are Hakim Ziyech versus Tottenham, Rudiger against Brentford, but number 1's got to be Kovacic against Liverpool. It's got to be just a one-touch finish on the volley, the way it hits the post and then goes in. The fact it was Liverpool, the fact that we were mounting that comeback as well. Then Pulisic scored shortly after. We were both at that game together, sat next to each other actually. And it just felt like that goal actually just gave the crowd the energy, gave the players the energy. And you could just look at all the Liverpool fans' faces behind the goal in the shed end, and they were just like, bloody hell, what a goal. And they looked shocked as well and almost scared that this could actually set the tempo now in Chelsea's favour. So that was a brilliant goal, and he doesn't really score often, does he, Kovacic? But when he scores, it's often a cracker. So I think you're in agreement with me. It's got to be that one, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think just the technique to do that as well is so hard. I think people just think it's easy because you almost smashing the ball into the goal. But I think the technique, the fact he was backpedaling to get it on target, it was just I can't even. Yeah, it's just a goal. I watch it back every now and again. And I just think, what a goal! I think Mason Mount against West Ham would have been up there as well.
Yeah,
for me.
That's a shout. That's a shout.
That was a really good goal. Shame about the result, but I think Kovacic for me was just it was just the fact that it was against Liverpool as well makes it even sweeter. But just the way that he took that goal. I think I can't remember if it was Alan Shearer or Ian Wright. I think Ian Wright agreed. I think Alan Shearer went for Mo Salah and against Man City, and then Ian Wright went with Kovacic because it's just, as a striker, he knows that is a very difficult goal to score from that distance as well. It's just I can't sort of overlook that for me. And like I said, for me was arguably one of our best players last season as well. So Kovacic gets the nod for me and from yourself as well. But let's talk about loanees for a minute as well, because obviously we had some very good players go out on loan. Some I think who have moved on now. Danny Drinkwater, Jake Clark, Salter's moved on as well, or been released from the club, I should say. But who was your standout loanee that you may have not watched, entirely for the whole season, but just in terms of some of the games that you did get to see of them?
Yeah, I've been following a couple of Twitter threads and seeing some statistics of players that have performed out on loan. For me, there's three potentially that really deserve a shout. Armando Broja, Southampton, he was fantastic. He's been compared to Diego Costa at times. Scored against some big teams. I think he might have scored against Arsenal or another big team. I can't remember. It might have been Tottenham, actually. And he's been fantastic out on loan at Southampton. Now a player that's going to come back to Chelsea this summer and arguably think, all right, now I proved I can play in the Premier League. I should be playing at a better club, or go out and learn and play more minutes. Another player, Levi Colwill, I think has been fantastic. Got Huddersfield to the playoff finals. Very unlucky to score that own goal against Nottingham Forest at Wembley. But I really hope that doesn't bring his confidence down, because he's another player that could potentially, if we don't get the likes of Koulibaly and Koundé, a player that could come back and maybe play a role at Chelsea next season. But my number one's got to be Conor Gallagher. It's got to be Conor Gallagher. I think he was good at West Brom 2 seasons ago, but I really feel like he stepped up at Crystal Palace this season. And I think his kind of loan journey's been fantastic. He started off at Charlton, then he was almost too good for that level at Charlton, who were kind of just above the relegation zone in the Championship, or they might have even been League One, I can't remember. Went out to Swansea in January, then he went to West Brom last season, and then he spent this season now on a loan at Crystal Palace. Brilliant player, almost like a box-to-box midfielder, which we haven't really seen at Chelsea since maybe a Frank Lampard. He can provide goals, assists. He's strong as well for his build and his size. So I really think he needs to be integrated into this Chelsea team. And before we even consider bringing players in, we should look at what we've currently got. And I think that number one player that we've currently got in terms of performance and ability, arguably over a player like Billy Gilmore, is Conor Gallagher.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I feel there's, like I said, obviously we've got a really good, youth development set up, and we've also got players that are in the first team that potentially should be staying and playing in our first team as well. But I agree with you. I think Conor Gallagher for me was outstanding. I've gone for two other players that, just because I knew he was going to go, I knew he was potentially going to be on your list, but for me, there was obviously Ethan Ampadu was a really good player that I got to see of, because just watching Serie A every now and again, and just seeing some of the games, I feel like he's developed as he's been over there. Even just vocally watching some of the games, and he's almost a captain. He's vocally instructing players on the pitch what to do defensively. That's one of the key things you need to be able to do as a defender, is to be vocal, and to almost be a captain without the armband on. And I think he done that. And defensively as well, I think he's definitely more switched on. Even watching him for Wales during the Nations League as well, he's one of these players that I think, maybe not at Chelsea, but I think if he was to move on somewhere else, I think he'd go on to be a really good player, develop even more.
He's so versatile, isn't he, as well? Centre back, right back, central midfield, CDM.
Yeah, he can play. And this is why as well, the other player I've gone for, I like players who can do that. We need players that we're able, very much like Chalobah. Chalobah can play defence, or he can play sort of the DM role as well. But the other player I've gone for is Henry Lawrence, who is a player that was coming through the youth setup. He's done really, really well. Very, really good, bright talent. Can play left back, right back, centre back, wingers, defensive mid. He can play pretty much everywhere. Probably a striker as well. But he went on loan to Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon, and I think I can't remember when he got injured, but he got injured and just struggled to get back in the team. But he's someone that I think will have the talent to go for, maybe not at Chelsea, but I think he's definitely one that's got talent. He needs to be either in the Championship. I think that would be his level next season. If he doesn't stay at Chelsea, which I doubt he will. When I say stay, I mean, I think we'll loan him out somewhere else. And I think a Championship club would be silly not to pick him up, because he's that good. He's very young still, but I think he's got the talent to go even further, I think, in my opinion. So they would have been my key outstanding ones, I think. And obviously the ones you mentioned, Broja, Levi Colwill as well, I think were the other key ones as well. I thought Ian Matson as well, Coventry, done well. I think he struggled to the back end of the season though. I can't really remember. And to be honest, I stopped following Coventry because I thought I wanted them to get promoted, and they were in the playoffs at one point and they just dropped off. So I'll be honest, I didn't really watch much of Coventry. But yeah, my key standouts would have been Ampadu and Henry Lawrence.
Yeah, no, it's a good list. And when you're talking about Ampadu again, new language, I doubt he spoke Italian before heading out to Venice. New challenge, new country, new league. He's about to play for the Wales at the World Cup this
He's
this
going to say
winter.
this summer.
Yeah, it was on the tip of my tongue. This winter, it's this December, this winter now, and but yeah, I think like you mentioned, maybe now he's about to perform at that highest level. He'll want to play for a club at that highest level, whether that's Chelsea or somewhere else. But I definitely think he's got a future at Chelsea, just because that versatile aspect he can bring. We're going to need to fill in those gaps sometimes at midfield, right back, right centre back, centre back. There's going to be so many options for him, and with the depth as well, we're going to need next season in terms of a fixture almost every 3-4 days again, because they're going to try to squeeze in fixtures midweek to make up for the time lost at the World Cup. I think we're going to need him and Gallagher are the two I'd bring back.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think he's proven that he can play at that level, albeit abroad, but I think he can still have a massive role to play at Chelsea. Let's move on to flop of the season in terms of a loanee. There shouldn't really be many. In fact, I've actually just thought of one in my head as well, but I'm going to let you go first. I'll let you start this one off.
I think it's just players when you think of flops that have gone out on loan. Because you look at players maybe like Maatsen that maybe finished the season quite poorly, but you still know that they've got a bright future, you feel. But when I'm thinking flops, are players that are arguably now in their late 20s that have played in the Premier League or at a decent level and have gone out on loan and haven't shown, whether it's discipline reasons or ability reasons, that they're worthy of coming back to Chelsea and playing a role for next season. Players that haven't maybe even featured under Thomas Tuchel, so it's kind of almost an opportunity for them to redeem themselves. But they've done no favors to themselves with their performances out on loan this year. And there are two that stand out for me. It's in the Serie A, Timo Bakayoko. I feel like the only thing I've seen of him this season is him coming out of a cigar when AC Milan won the Serie A, and I almost forgot that this guy existed in my head. I just saw him and I was thinking, the arrogance of this guy to come out of a cigar when he's probably hasn't even kicked a ball since November or October. And then the other one is Michy Batshuayi. I feel like we haven't seen much of him. He's playing in Turkey now with Besiktas. I thought he was doing quite well from what I was seeing on his Instagram when he was posting after games and victories. But then following up on a Twitter thread I saw recently, I think he was given a 2.5 out of 10 as the rating, which I took with a bit of a pinch of salt. But I feel like, again, a player now that you're just wondering, what is his level? Where does he go next? I know he gets picked to play for Belgium from time to time, but I don't feel like Belgium have much depth in their squad as well. And the manager always picks those experienced players over maybe the youngsters. So yeah, I think a player either we've got to move on this summer if someone's willing to take him off our books, but no future at Chelsea for both of those players, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree. Bakayoko was my first choice, and I had in brackets Michy Batshuayi, because I just think he's had a number of opportunities to prove himself, not just at Chelsea. Obviously, I think he scored the goal at West Brom, didn't he? So I will give him his credit for that. But I think he's had enough opportunities to prove himself, to show that he can force his way into a Chelsea squad, and he just doesn't do it. He doesn't do it. I don't think I can't remember his record at Palace, but I can't remember it being brilliant. Otherwise, they would have potentially signed him.
I think he did well the first time he went out on loan there, and then he hardly got 3 goals, I think, and there's the second time he went out on loan there.
Yeah. So they were my two. I didn't want to add anyone and the one I just thought about, and not for the reasons that they played poorly, was just Billy Gilmore, because I think the reason it flopped was just because of it was just the wrong club to send him to. I think Norwich was, obviously there was that sort of weird sort of fallout with Gilmore and Daniel Farke at one point, I think, as well. It just felt a bit weird. And then I think and obviously the fans sort of turned on him as well. It's just a weird, so not in terms of ability for Billy Gilmore, because we know he's got the ability to go on to be one of the best, but I just think in terms of the actual deal, it was definitely a loan deal that flopped, in my opinion.
It wasn't the right move for both parties, I felt. I'm going back to Batshuayi. I'm just thinking now, he's been on loan at Crystal Palace twice, Borussia Dortmund, Valencia, Besiktas, and none of those clubs have fancied signing him, which says a lot, in my opinion.
He reminds me of Anthony Martial because he's almost
Yeah.
that sort of. How many clubs do you want? And
Hmm.
I mean, where did he end? I think did he go to? Was it Sevilla?
Sevilla, yeah.
Yeah, and
He didn't even register an assist there, I feel.
I think they just said they don't want to keep
Yeah.
him. He's not good enough to play at the club, and you almost feel like Mitsi Batshuayi is in that bracket as well. That they're just players that have one or two decent games, or they do something decent in one game, and I think he had the quality to potentially be at Chelsea at one point. But I just think, like you said, some players are more interested about. I know he had like a massive affiliation with like the Batman stuff and all that. The social media side of things sometimes takes over people's ability to actually play football,
Yeah,
and when
probably
it does that,
the only reason he signed for Valencia because they had the bat maybe in the club
yeah,
logo.
it's a shame because obviously he's got the quality. He's a professional footballer, but he just doesn't produce
Yeah.
enough to warrant staying at Chelsea, in my opinion. But let's move on. We've got a couple more to do.
Hmm.
Best match. I'll let you go first.
Hmm. I've got a few in my mind. I think I was going to say the Chelsea Liverpool, the 2-2, simply
You
because
can only pick one.
okay. This one's throwing me off because I feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing.
I
I'm
mean,
just.
I've got one already,
All right, you
and
go first. You go first then.
I would have said Juventus game
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
expected more from Juventus, and it was just a game that I thought was going to be much more of a struggle. I did have the Liverpool in my head,
Hmm.
but we just didn't win it. So I don't know
No,
if I can put that as my first. But
yeah.
in terms of Juventus, I expected a lot more from them, and the way we turned them over, three Cobham sort of graduates on the score
Mhm.
sheet as well. I think it would have been Ruben Loftus-Cheek, I think, for the fourth goal that assisted Werner, I think, or was it Callum
Yeah,
Hudson-Odoi? I can't remember now.
yeah,
But yeah, that would have been my goal,
yeah.
my game, because I just think we out battered them, we hammered them,
It could have
and
been more than four. It could have easily been more
exactly,
than four. Yeah.
exactly, and it was yeah, it was just a weird game. These sort of big players that we know from in terms of Juventus, and they didn't put out a weak squad. It
Yeah.
was a really good Juventus squad to beat them 4-0 at home. For me, is arguably the best game of the season.
No, I'd have to agree. For me, that was probably the one I was thinking. I was trying to unlock that little part of my brain that could pull that one out because I was at Stamford Bridge that day and I was just
Yeah,
so
same.
impressed with the football we were playing. Champagne football, I think Joe Cole described it like when Ruben Loftus-Cheek was just dribbling players in the box. And like you mentioned, it wasn't a bad Juventus side. It's players that we've been linked to across the years, the likes of Alexandro,
I think
Rabiot,
Dybala was on the
Dybala
bench.
might have played a part. Yeah,
He was on the
Morata was
bench.
on
He
the
came off.
pitch.
Yeah,
Morata, ex Chelsea player. I've got another one. It's a weird one, but even the game at the Bernabeu when we lost, I just felt like the football
yeah, yeah.
we played at times was some of the best football we'd ever seen. I think it came a couple of days after when we beat Southampton 6-0. And it almost felt like, where was this the last couple of months? Where was this football when we needed it the most? And I know we lost that game in Madrid, but I think when Timo Werner scored that third goal, I think the joy we experienced at that exact moment, we thought this is happening. We're gonna qualify. We're gonna keep a clean sheet.
We should have as
We
well.
should have, yeah. And even Pulisic and Jorginho had big chances towards the end. So I think we didn't win that game. We lost. We didn't qualify. So I think I can't play. I can't put it as my top. But no, for me, it's actually we did win the game, but we didn't win on
Mm.
aggregate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But no, 4-0 Chelsea Juventus at Stamford Bridge. Free Cobham Academy boys scoring. It's got to be that one.
yeah. I agree. Let's talk about your worst game of the season. And again, I've got one straight in my head already. I did write it down earlier, but there's only one that's short. There's two. There's two I've got, and I'll jump in.
Go for it.
Um,
Go for it.
so my first one was Brentford
Yeah, yeah,
4-1.
yeah,
So that was just. I mean, I think we took the lead. I'm sure was that the
yeah,
Rudiger game.
yeah.
So we took the lead, and then we just collapsed in the second half. I think it was like a moment of like 10 minutes in the game, just after half time. I think maybe an hour into the game, and we just folded, and it was just diabolical. It was absolutely diabolical.
Didn't feel real. It didn't feel real, did it? No.
No, no. So I think that was the worst. And the other one was Everton at Goodison. That was probably the worst. But as much as the result hurt me more in the Brentford, it was 4-1 and we were leading. But the football we played against Everton at Goodison was probably the worst football. I think I even said that on the video, the match review. But it's the worst football I think I've watched of Chelsea in a very very long time. It was just poor from start to end.
Yeah, even the reverse fixture at home against Everton,
Mm,
well, it just felt like we had every reason to beat Everton that day. They were playing some abysmal football, and it was, I think, November, December time, and they managed to snatch a draw in the end. It's
yeah.
just, it felt like such a die-up game. Even the two games against United as well, where we should be
Mm,
battering them given their form, and we had so many chances, but again, not clinical enough, and draws in both games. But I think I'm going to have to agree just that Brentford game, simply because we just didn't know what was happening to us. And if I had to compare it to a game last season, it would have to have been that West Brom one where we lost 5-2 at Stamford Bridge, almost like a lapse in concentration. You've got some experienced defenders on the pitch like Thiago Silva and Rudiger, and even Edouard Mendy, I think, had a shocker that day. Like all our players you can usually count on just didn't perform, just switched off. Offensively, again, I can't really remember a big shot on target other than the Rudiger one. So I'm going to have to go with that one, I think. And
yeah.
I was at Stamford Bridge that day, and it pained me, it hurt me.
I think that was the one where Ericsson was just left unmarked.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I can't remember
Oh,
if it was that game, but I think he was left unmarked and he just almost walked it into the back of the net. It was like everyone was scared to tackle him, which is weird.
yeah.
But yeah, I think for me that was the worst, the one that pained me the most. But the last one we've got is the sort of the best moment. So it doesn't have to be a game. It could be anything. And I've again, I've got one. When you mentioned it earlier, I've got one stuck in my head already. But what was your best moment in terms of the season as a whole?
Obviously, there's some joyful moments like the Super Cup and the Club World Cup, but it was almost like momentum building up to that moment. I'm not going to mention any of the Wembley games because they ended up being heartbreaking. But it's a weird one. It's not. It's just a single Premier League game and a single moment. But when Havertz scored the winner in injury time against Newcastle at home,
Yeah,
it just felt. I don't know. There was something about that game I was just so pleased about, and I think I haven't celebrated a goal that much in a very, very long time. Maybe along with the Pulisic one against West Ham, just a last minute winner. There was something so special about it, and because I think it was the day after the whole announcement of the sanctions as well, it felt, you know what, despite all these sanctions, we're Chelsea, we're still going to fight, we're still going to carry on. And it just showed the resilience of the players, the fans, the club. So for me, that goal just, it almost sums up the whole season as a whole in a way. Just we gave it our all, despite things being very, very tough at times. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But yeah, that goal for me, and it was a brilliant goal as well. Amazing
it
pass from
was.
Jorginho, great finish from Havertz. So I think it was Chelsea, Newcastle, Havertz on the 12th of March, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that was a really good game, and you're right. I think after the sanctions, obviously there was a lot of banter flying around on the internet, and we were going to be sort of not being able to travel to team on sort of team hotels and planes and all that stuff as well. So I think obviously there was a lot of overcast around the club at the time to still get that result, albeit sort of last minute of the game. I think that was perfect way to end that game. But mine would have been the Club World Cup, just because it was the trophy that we as Chelsea fans we really wanted. Albeit I think we won in extra time. I think it was Havertz that scored the
Penalty, wasn't
penalty.
it?
I think in extra time, didn't he? So I think yeah, and a lot of people sort of just turn their nose up to the Club World Cup because they don't necessarily understand the importance of it. Especially in England, it's not really unless you're in it, you don't really care about it. But I think the fact that we always wanted it, we'd attempted to try and win it previously as well. And we finally got it. It's almost like the final piece of that puzzle of winning everything, and the likes of Aspilicueta been able to say that he's won every single trophy possible at Chelsea as well. Those kind of things for me, just even if he does end up leaving and going to Barcelona, at least we can say that he's going away as a legend of the club as well. So I think those kind of things for me are just, we don't know when we're going to get that opportunity to do that again. So the fact that we've lived it, we've seen our club lift the Club World Cup, priceless.
Brilliant moment, yeah. I didn't realise how nervous I was for that game until I woke up that morning, made a cup of coffee, and my hand was almost shaking because I was pretty nervous. So yeah, I think that one would probably rank quite highly on my list as well.
Yeah, definitely. But it's been a good season. It's been up and down, of course. We've had the highs, we had the lows, we had the anger, we've had the euphoric moments as well. But
That's
yeah,
Chelsea Football Club for us.
I
It's
was
another
just
day
about to
of
say,
being a fan of Chelsea Football Club.
you wouldn't want it any other way at Chelsea. We do better under pressure and in crisis anyway, so it's a good thing. But looking forward to next season. Obviously, I'm sure we'll have some other ad hoc podcast episodes that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks until the Premier League's back. There's obviously the fixtures come out on Thursday. I think I said on my previous video, they were out today. I'm just excited for football, so I just wanted to fast forward to Thursday. But yeah, they'll be out Thursday, so there'll be a video, I'm sure, for that as well. But Theo, as always, thanks for joining me from the Shed End. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like I said earlier, and Spotify, all the social accounts as well. Don't forget those. And we'll be back very soon. Thanks for listening.